Hey, this is Mr. Spensey. Welcome back. Here to talk, your Stat Sensei, here to talk more about Type 1 and Type 2 errors. In this video, we're going to specifically look at a Type 2 error. This particular problem is exactly the same one that we modified slightly. So I'm not going to, well, actually, you know what? I will read all of it. So a researcher wants to conduct a study to test whether listening to soothing music for 20 minutes will help to reduce diastolic blood pressure patients with high blood pressure, compared to simply sitting in a quiet room in a noise-free environment for 20 minutes. 100 patients with high blood pressure are available for the study. So basically, we have one group sitting and listening to music and another group sitting in a quiet room. Null hypothesis for this study is that there is no difference in the reduction of diastolic blood pressure. So basically, the ones listening to music would equal diastolic blood pressure drop would equal those sitting in a quiet room. If the null hypothesis is rejected, the clinic will offer this music therapy as a free service to their patients with high blood pressure. Describe a Type 2 error and its consequence in the context of the study. Also discuss the context of the study, which is more serious of Type 1 or Type 2. First off, as far as what's more serious, that's going to be on your own viewpoint. You just need to back it up with some evidence. So in this case, we have our null hypothesis, mu1 equals mu2. And by the way, we should be looking at our recipe. And all right, and because we're always starting off with write the null, write the alternative, define the parameter. And once again, you can do that either order. And we define mu1 is listening to music, diastolic pressure drop for listening to music. So this is music, and this is quiet. All right. And we said the alternative was the diastolic drop for those listening to music is greater than sitting in a quiet room. That's what we're testing. Well, it asked us to figure out what a Type 2 error is. Well, a Type 2 error, we need to write our definition, is the probability of failing to reject the null. All right. A Type 2 error is mistakenly rejecting the null, mistakenly failing to reject. Don't forget that word failing, even though I just skipped it. Reject the null when in fact it's false. In this case, we would mistakenly believe that there was no difference. So here's what's happening. We believe this, and we don't believe that. In this case, we mistakenly believe that there was no difference in listening to music and sitting in a quiet room on lowering blood pressure, when in fact listening to music was more effective. As a consequence, the clinic would not provide an effective treatment listening to music for lowering diastolic blood pressure. All right. And then they also asked, discuss which is more serious, a Type 1 or Type 2. Really, it's going to depend on you. You've got to come up with a good reason. All right. And I gave from a clinic's perspective, I gave from a patient's perspective, and you may have a totally different perspective. Just back it up and I'll help you with that in just a moment. So from the clinic, a Type 1 error is more serious because the clinic is wasting money on an ineffective treatment, telling patients they are improving when in fact they are not. Now, one thing I also want to say about that is I have students that go, well, the problem is they could get sued. The clinic could get sued. And that's true. The clinic could get sued. But why would they get sued? So you got to be more specific than that. So basically, you could say the clinic is offering a treatment saying that it's effective when it's not. So the clinic could get sued. That's why it would be very bad to have a Type 1 error. All right. But you have to back it up in some way. A Type 2 error from the patient standpoint is more serious because they're not receiving an effective treatment and will be forced to treat their condition with drugs or some other more invasive treatment. Now, you might say, well, the patient could die. Because that's why a type, and it's like, why would they die? Well, they could die because you're giving it, Type 1 would be giving an ineffective treatment and telling them they're getting better when they were not, or their condition could worsen or something like that. but you have to back it up. It's because for type 1, you're giving an ineffective treatment and telling it it's working when it's not. The type 2, the problem is you're withholding an effective treatment. All right. So you need to point out some reason why one or the other is worse or better. Part B, a p-value of 0.247 is calculated. Explain the meaning of the p-value in context and explain what type of error may be committed. This is a big p-value. With a p-value this large, it's going to be larger than our typical alpha, so we're going to fail to reject. So we start off by defining p-value. P-value is the probability of getting a test statistic as extreme or more extreme, given that the null is true. In this case, there's a 24.7% chance that we would get a test statistic this extreme in favor of music having a greater reduction in diastolic blood pressure than sitting in a quiet room, when in fact, the two treatments are equal in their effectiveness. A p-value of 0.247 is greater than alpha equal to 0.05. Thus, we would have failed to reject the null. And if we fail to reject the null, the only type of error that we could have committed is a type 2 error. All right, so this wraps up this video. So I'll see you later in the next one. Thanks for joining, and don't commit any errors. Bye.